Okay guys, this next topic is activity-based costing or ABC costing as shortly known. ABC costing is alternative of absorption costing, or absorption costing is also known as volume-based costing. The reason we have ABC costing, remember the purpose of absorption costing was to divide fixed overheads into units using a measure. And we are going to do the same thing in activity-based costing. But the problem with absorption costing was that we were using a few measures. We were using labor cost, labor hours, machine hours, and units. They were the three main things that we were using. There were other things as well, but in most of the questions we saw we were doing labor hours, machine hours, and units. And we were using machine hours and labor hour either for the whole organization, which was called blanket rate, and then we might have a separate rate for separate department, which was called departmental rate. But if you think about it, dividing overheads on just labor hour or machine hour is not going to be very accurate, because there are many overheads and they change with many different things. So charging it based on just one thing would not be very realistic. So traditionally, absorption costing was okay because traditionally we didn't have as much overheads. Usually the cost of the product was mostly variable cost. If there was overhead, it was about 5-10% of the total cost, and it didn't matter if we made a mistake or we were not accurate in that 5-10% of the cost. But in today's world, in the modern world, the cost structure has shifted. We have most of the cost as overheads. About 70% of some of the product's cost is overheads. So if we use absorption costing using labor hours or machine hours, dividing overheads based on that is not going to be very accurate. So that's why we have a more complex system of activity-based costing, which realizes the activity used in different organizations and then charges overheads based on different activities. So the reason for ABC costing is the overhead becoming more and a need to find a accurate cost. Okay, remember the steps of absorption costing. I will not teach absorption costing here. That is F2, assume knowledge. So you need to go back. If you don't understand, revise it and then come back and look at this topic. Remember that in absorption costing we had allocation, apportionment, reapportionment, and then absorption, and then under or absorption. The steps in ABC costing. Okay, the steps in ABC costing are, first thing is to find major activities of organization. It is what the organization does. Like scheduling is an activity, ordering is an activity, machining is an activity, delivering is an activity. In absorption costing, we were finding departments, but here we are finding activities. And then find cost drivers of those activities. Cost drivers, the driving factors of cost in those activities, means what increases and decreases cost in those activities. For example, ordering activities cost will be increased or decreased by orders. Scheduling activities cost will be increased by setups. The more setups, the more will be cost. Machining activity will be machine hours. Delivering activities will be deliveries. So the numbers that I've written here, I will explain in the bottom. Actually, I'm working on a question here, a simple question. Okay, so once we have found the activities, then put cost of those activities into a cost pool, like take all the cost of ordering and total it, take all the cost of scheduling and total it. That is called cost pool. For example, the total cost of ordering becomes 100,000, the total cost of scheduling becomes 50,000, the total cost of machining becomes 70,000, the total cost of delivering becomes 80,000. You could do step second, third, or third, second. You could replace the position, whichever order you want to do it. It will be okay. And then find cost per driver, which is dividing the total cost by total activity, just like we did in absorption costing, where we took the total cost in a department and we divided it by total machine hours or labor hours or units in that department. So this step is the exact same thing. For example, we had 100,000 total cost of ordering and our total orders were 1,000, so that will give us 100 per order. And our total cost of scheduling is 50,000, total setups are 50, that will give us 1,000 per setup. We have machining 70,000 hours or 7,000, it will give us 10 per machine hour. We have delivery 80,000 cost and deliveries are 800, that will give us 100 per delivery. And then the fifth step is to charge it to units based on the use of those activities. So let's directly jump to a question, a past paper question on activity-based costing. Okay, we have a question here. Required calculate the budgeted full production cost per unit of each unit using DAFCO's current method of absorption costing. All working should be two decimal places. So they are currently using absorption costing. We need to find the cost using absorption costing, and then calculate the budgeted full production cost per unit of each product using activity-based costing. All working should be two decimal places. And then C, discuss the impact on the selling price and the sales volume of each product, which a change to the activity-based costing would be expected to bring about. Okay. I have another question here as well from the book. You can look at that. But for this video, I will only work on this comprehensive question. Okay, DAFCO manufactures 3 products, X, Y, Z. Demand for X and Y is relatively elastic. Remember, elastic means, you will study this in pricing chapter. When the price elasticity of demand is more than 1, it means it is elastic. Elastically simply means that a small change in price will have a big change in demand. Inelastic means that for demand to change, price needs to be changed a lot. So it simply means that if we change the price of X and Y, demand will change by huge margin. If we change the price of Z, demand will change as well, but not as much. Each product uses the same material and the same type of direct labor, but in different quantities. For many years, the company has been using full absorption costing and absorbing overheads on the basis of labor hours. Selling prices are then determined using cost plus pricing. Okay, currently they are using cost plus pricing, which means finding the cost of the product and then adding profit margin to it to find the selling price. This is common within the industry, with most competitors applying a standard markup. Remember, markup is a profit added on cost. Budgeted production and sales volume for XYZ for the next year are 20,000, 16,000, and 22,000 units respectively. The budgeted direct labor costs, direct costs of the 3 products are shown below. We have direct material 25, 28, 22, direct labor 30, 36, and 24. In the next year, DAFCO also expects to incur indirect production cost of 1.3 million, which are analyzed as follows. We have cost pools, 4 cost pools. We have machine setup cost to 80,000, and cost driver for this is number of batches. Sometimes the driver will be told, sometimes it will not be told, but it will not be very difficult to pick which driver relates to which if you work on a few questions. We have material ordering cost, which is 316, and purchase orders relate to this. And then machine running cost 420, machine hours relate to this one. And then general factory cost 361,000, and machine hours relate to this one as well. Overall, the total overheads is 1.3 million. The following additional data relates to each product. Product batch size is 500, 800, and 400. What it means is that in one batch that we produce, there is 500 units of X. In one batch of Y, there is 800 units of Y. In one batch of Z, there is 400 units of Z. Number of purchase orders per batch, 4, which simply means that the 500 units is ordered in 4 orders. Number of purchase orders per batch is 5, which simply means that 800 units is ordered in 5 orders, and then 400 units ordered in 4 orders, which means 100 units per order. Machine hours per unit is 1.5 and 1.25 and 1.40. DEFCO wants to boost sales revenue in order to increase profits, but its capacity to do this is limited because of its use of cost plus pricing and the application of standard markup. So we want to increase our sales revenue, but because we are using cost plus pricing, we can't do that. The reason is because if we are using cost plus pricing, if our cost is higher, then the selling price would also be higher, which means that the demand would be less. So if we change the cost base, if we use activity-based costing and the cost base changes, maybe the selling price changes and maybe the demand changes as well. The finance director has suggested using activity-based costing ABC instead of full absorption costings, since this will alter the cost of the products and may therefore enable a different price to be charged. So our finance director suggests that if we use activity-based costing, maybe the cost changes and we make a profit. Okay, let's look at the absorption costing first. I've already copied the variable cost, which was given here. Now we have to find the overheads to give us the total cost. Remember, they're currently using absorption costing and they're using labor hours, I believe. Using current method of absorption costing. Where was that information given about labor hours? Okay, each unit uses direct labor but in different quantities. Absorption costing or has on labor hour basis here. So we are going to take the total overheads. It doesn't matter in absorption costing which activity it relates to. We divide it directly on one activity, labor hours or machine hours. Okay, now we have to find total labor hours. Labor hours is not given as total, but we can find it. Here the cost of the labor hours is given. Like you have 30 and then cost per hour is given. So if we look at that, we will be able to find cost per unit. Total cost per unit is 30 divided by 12, and then I'm going to do this for all. So we have 2.5 hours here, 3 hours here, and 12 hours here. Right? I just divided by the labor cost per unit. I took labor cost per unit divided by labor cost per hour. It gives me total hours. Now I'm going to take total units, which is budgeted 20,000, 16,000, 22,000. 20,000, 16,000, 22,000. Yeah. So now taking the hours per unit multiplied by total units, it will give us total hours. And we are going to do this for all three of the activities, all three units. So adding it together, we will have total hours, which is 142,000. So 1.3 million divided by 142,000 will give us 9.7 per hour. Now, I've already linked that. If you take the hours, cost per hour, and multiply by hours, it will give you cost per unit overheads. So we have hours multiplied by cost per hour, we have the cost. Adding it together, we have 79 total cost, 93 total cost, and 65 total cost. So this is using absorption costing. Now let's look at activity-based costing. Remember, the material and labor costs will be the same. The only thing that will change is the overheads. So in activity-based costing, we have to find the activities of the organization, which is here: setup, ordering, machine running, general facility, and then cost drivers are given here, and then cost pool is given here, and then we have to take cost pool and divide it by cost driver. So cost pool is given, but total cost drivers have to be found. We have for scheduling 280,000 total cost pool, 280,000, 316,000, 316,000, 420,000, and finally we have 361,400. 361,400 for general facility. So this is our total cost drivers. Okay, I have to add extra 0 here. Let's move this from here. Okay, now we have to find activity cost drivers. I had already found it, but I will redo it so you can understand how I found it. Okay, remember we need batches, total number of batches, total number of purchase orders, and total number of machine orders. So let's look at total number of setups. If we look at batch, see, each batch represents a setup. So if we find how many batches there are, we will find how many setups do we have for each of the unit. So we have for product X 20,000 units, and each in each setup in each batch there is 500 units, so that would give us 40 setups. And we had 16,000 units here, and we had 800 units in each batch, so that will give us 20 setups. And we had 22,000 units here, and then we had 400 units, so we have 55 setups. So we have 800 and 400, and the units were 20,000, 16,000, and 22,000. Okay, so I've taken total units and divided by batch. It will give me total number of batches, which means setups. And then it is said here that for each batch we need 4 orders. What I can do is simply take the exact same thing, this one, the only thing that is different here is I have to multiply it by total number of orders. So it will give me total batches, and then batches multiplied by orders. Or I could have just taken this and multiplied, but I will do it separately in this bracket so you understand how it is done. So if you were doing this separately, you would have done it this. So the extra thing that you are doing is just putting a bracket and multiplying by total number of orders, which is 4, 5, and 4. 4, 5 here, and then 4 here. So it gives us total number of orders. Now let's look at machine hours. Machine hours per unit was given 1.5, 1.25, and 1.40. So we had 20,000 multiplied by 1.5, 16,000, 1.25, and 22,000 multiplied by 1.40, I believe. We have 1.40, yeah. So now we have the total cost drivers. Now we'll take those activities and divide it by these drivers. So we have 280,000 divided by 115. It gives us 2,400 cost per setup. Remember, it is not per unit, it is per activity. We will take this and divide by drivers. So it gives us 658 per order. And then machine running based on machine hours. Now this is per hour, 5.20. And the general facility also uses per hour. So we will do the same thing here. So this is not yet per unit. Now let's find per unit. So scheduling, which is setup, now we have to divide it by units. Now this is per setup. How many units do we have in a setup? We have 500 units. So divided by 500 units will give us per unit. Cost per setup divided by 400 units in a setup will give us cost per setup. And then divided by 800 units. Remember, 500, 800, and 400. And then for ordering, we have the cost per order, but we have 4 orders. Okay, we have 4 orders for total 500 units. So we are going to multiply by 4 and then divide it by 500. So it is just like previous one, but here we are multiplying it by 4 because we need 4 orders. And then doing the same for the rest. Multiply by 5 and 4. Divide by 800 units. Yeah, 800 units. Or just to save time, you could just copy paste. Multiply by 4, bracket. Divide. Then running cost, they are per hour, and then hours are 1.5, 1.25, 1.40. $1.25 and 1.40. The other one is also per hour. So 1.5, 1.25, and 1.40. Okay, so now we have different costs, all 4 of them for all units. So we add it together, it gives us the total cost for each unit. So which I have already linked here. So when added together, we have 79 cost per unit, 86 cost per unit, and 65 cost per unit. Now when we compare that with absorption costing, remember absorption costing is 79, 93, 65. 79, 93, 65. And then activity-based costing is 79, 86, and 65. 79, 86, 65. Let's make it this 86. Okay, I'm double checking for any mistake. Okay, if there is any mistake, you guys can find. Okay, so based on our calculation, remember any comment that you give based on your calculation, that comment is going to be right. Okay, so they said here that the price of X and Y is elastic and Z is inelastic. You can see here using absorption costing, ABC cost is higher. So what it means is that the demand is X is going to be decreased, but because it is not as much higher, it will not affect demand as much. But the cost of product Y is about $6 lower. That means that demand is going to be increased by a higher margin, because it is elastic. The cost of Z has increased, so which means that the cost of Z will also, the demand of Z will decrease, but because they said Z is inelastic, demand will not decrease as much. So the conclusion is that they should use ABC costing because it will increase the demand in Y, it will decrease the demand in Z and X and Z, but it is not going to be as much. X not as much because the margin is not very higher, and Z not as much because it is inelastic. So this is activity costing done.